All right. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد, Ramadan Mubarak to each and every one of you. I hope that your coffee withdrawal isn't affecting you as bad as it can. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward us for our patience. So Quranic parables. This is an interesting topic and a fun one. And by fun, I mean it's fun because it really it focuses on our senses in order to better understand an abstract concept. And the word that's used in Arabic and in the Quran is mathal. And the word mathal means similar. So something is similar to something else. You will say fulan mithil fulan. So and so is like so and so, similar. So a parable, an example, or an analogy is precisely that. You take one idea or one concept, situation, observation, and you show how it's similar to another concept or situation. So what the Quran does is it takes the natural world around us, that which is perceivable by our senses and tangible to us, and uses that and shows us how a theological issue is similar to that thing or that observation of yours. So that's how the Quran uses it, and it helps bring these seemingly abstract or the seemingly uh, unapplicable ideas or irrelevant ideas to us and brings it closer to where it becomes personal. It becomes something that we are able to see in our own lives or at least appreciate it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Ankabut, وَتِلْكَ الْأَمْثَالُ نَضْرِبُهَا لِلنَّاسِ وَمَا يَعْقِلُهَا إِلَّا الْعَالِمُونَ. These are the parables we present to mankind, and those who understand that are the ones who have knowledge. And this is a specific type of knowledge, and it's knowledge of Islam. And what Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala in his commentary on the Quran says about this verse is that the parables of the Quran are centered around or focus on the fundamentals, the pillars of Islam, mainly, primarily Tawheed, monotheism, or Shirk, its opposite, and our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those who have understanding or understand these parables, they are able to take these parables from the abstract to something that is understandable. They understand how it functions, how it works. These are the people who have obtained knowledge of Islam. So the deeper understanding we have of these parables, the better we will understand Islam itself. So that's why I chose this topic for this Ramadan. Ramadan is the month of the Quran, and inshallah, this is something that can help enhance our understanding of the Quran. There are about 43 mathal in the Quran. There are 43 parables in the Quran. Some of them are, for example, there are two mathal, two parables in one context, such as what we're going to go to today. So that's why it goes up to 43. When you sum it down, it comes to just around 30, a little under 30. So it works perfectly for Ramadan. And I will go from beginning of the Quran towards the end. And the first parable presented in the Quran is verse 17 of Surah Al-Baqarah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَثَلُهُمْ كَمَثَلِ الَّذِي اسْتَوْقَدَ نَارًا فَلَمَّا أَضَاءَتْ مَا حَوْلَهُ ذَهَبَ اللَّهُ بِنُورِهِمْ وَتَرَكَهُمْ فِي ظُلُمَاتٍ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ صُمٌّ بُكْمٌ عُمْيٌ فَهُمْ لَا يَرْجِعُونَ أو كصيب من السماء فيه ظلمات ورعد وبرق يجعلون أصابعهم في آذانهم من الصواعق حذر الموت والله محيط بالكافرين يكاد البرق يخطف أبصارهم كلما أضاء لهم مشوا فيه وإذا أظلم عليهم قاموا ولو شاء الله لذهب بسمعهم وأبصارهم إن الله على كل شيء قدير. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says their example is like the example of a fire that has been ignited. So the first question is, who is they? Their example, who are we talking about here? Well, the verses prior to these verses clarify. Surah Al-Baqarah begins by categorizing mankind into three groups. And this is a categorization of spirituality or theology. The first group, in which Allah dedicates 4 verses to in Surah Al-Baqarah, are the believers. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes who the believers are, what they believe, and what they do. It's then followed by 2 verses that are dedicated to the disbelievers, those who openly proclaim theologies and have adopted theologies that do not coincide with Islam and with Tawheed. And Allah gives them 2 verses. And then a series of verses from verse 8 to verse 21, which is 12, 13 verses, are dedicated to hypocrites, the munafiqun. And a hypocrite here is defined as someone who outwardly proclaims Islam, but inwardly rejects it. Okay, so outwardly they go about saying, I am a Muslim, and they go to so and say, hey, I'm a Muslim. When they're around Muslims, they act like Muslims. They say what Muslims would say, they do what Muslims would do, but their heart rejects it. And this manifests itself especially in 2 circumstances. When they are alone, their hypocrisy comes out, their disbelief comes out, or when they are with other disbelievers. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points to these 2 things in the Quran itself. So this is the context here. And based on that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making something very clear to us. That is, there is a lot of focus in the Quran on the hypocrite group, more so than the disbelieving group, as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is foreshadowing the Islam's projection, the projection and trajectory of Muslim civilization, that the biggest problem Muslims will face, both at the societal level and in the inner level, is hypocrisy. When you look at Islamic history, when major problems such as foreign forces coming and invading Muslim lands, when governments are toppled, when innovations are presented and brought into Islam and spread in Muslim society, you find that those who are fueling the problems, are this hypocrite group. Likewise, that's from the outwardly problem. From inside, we as Muslims are always facing hypocrisy. It's part of being a believer, subhanallah. And the Prophet ﷺ says in a hadith, I am most fearful for you of the lesser shirk. And that is the shirk where we seek the pleasure of other people over the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a type of hypocrisy. Contradictions in what we say and what we do is a type of hypocrisy. Of course, these are varying levels. Someone who inwardly disbelieves but outwardly proclaims Islam, I mean, that is the highest form of hypocrisy. But then you have sub-forms that even a sincere believer might be challenged with. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dedicates a lot of verses to this concept of hypocrisy so that we can learn from it and protect ourselves from falling into it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says their example is like the example of someone who ignites a fire. And when they started to benefit from that fire, and that fire started to light around that, to provide that person with light, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes that light away from them, leaving them in a state of darkness where they cannot see. صُمٌّ بُكْمٌ عُمْيٌ فَهُمْ لَا يَرْجِعُونَ. They are deaf, dumb and blind. This is a metaphorical blindness and deafness and darkness, meaning when it comes to benefiting from spirituality, from what the Quran is saying, from what the Prophet ﷺ teaches us, they are deaf, dumb and blind. Like they're not benefiting at all from what they are hearing or what they are observing. فَهُمْ لَا يَرْجِعُونَ. So let's kind of analyze the elements here. So when you look at the parables of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by providing us with observable variables, such as fire, nar, fire, and then light, ada'at, and then dhulumat, darkness. These are all perceivable things that we all have experienced. There's no one living or who has lived who hasn't seen these things. And that's what makes these parables so beautiful, that we all experience these things and therefore we can all learn from them and deepen and enrich our understanding of Tawheed, of the Quran itself. So fire is one of the elements that the Quran uses a lot. Likewise, light and darkness. What do they represent? So let's look at fire. What does fire do for us? Fire provides light. Fire provides heat. But fire also burns. It's dangerous. Different than nur, right? Nur is a purer type of light. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هُوَ الَّذِي جَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ ضِيَاءً وَالْقَمَرَ نُورًا. He is the one who made the sun from diya. Diya comes from the sun, whereas nur comes from the moon. And as we know, the sun provides a strong light, but that light also provides heat, and sometimes that heat bothers us. Likewise, it's very difficult to look in the sun, if not impossible. Nur, this pure light that's coming from the moon, is light, but it doesn't have those negative side effects that comes with the heat of fire or the light of fire. So this is an important differentiation here, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that these hypocrites, they like that fire and they start benefiting from the fire. And what that means is they start benefiting from the benefits of being a Muslim or being part of a Muslim society. Now, today in our times, this isn't as clear as it was prior to our times or when these verses were being revealed. Being in a Muslim majority country, especially when Muslim civilization was the top civilization, when they were in the forefronts of inventions in education, science, medicine, etc., there was a lot to gain. When Muslim governments were the suitable governments for mankind, for progress, for building a civilization, there's a lot of reason to pretend to be a Muslim. They start benefiting from that. So this is what the hypocrites do. When it's in their benefit to pretend to be a Muslim, they pretend to be a Muslim to gain from it. Right? So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing their situation, knowing what's in their heart, what does He do? He says He takes away the nur. Notice the wording here. It's so important to understand the nuanced detail here. Allah is saying that they are using a fire for light, right? But what Allah does is He takes the nur, the light, out of the fire. What does it leave that fire with? The heat, the burning feeling. Because even if the fire is put out, the charcoal that was burning, that was fueling the fire, is still hot. Right? So it's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that He took away the true benefits of being a Muslim and leaves them with the heat, the negative side effects of what they are doing. Right? Now, where is this happening? That's the next question. It's happening primarily in the heart. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us these parables, imagine these effects, what's going on in this verse, how that can be going on in the heart. So when a heart is full of light, full of nur, right? The implications of that is that they understand the reality of life. They understand the purpose of the self or of life. They understand their place in society, in life. They understand the meaning of trials and tribulations. They understand the meaning of being a human. Right? They understand these things. That is the light that they are getting, and it's coming out of the heart. Right? However, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes away that light, what is left? The hardships, the negative, the kind of the burdens that come with being a Muslim. So we as Muslims, we are burdened with certain things. One of them is Ramadan. Right? Ramadan isn't a simple, easy task. Sure, for us Muslims, we enjoy it and we benefit from it. Alhamdulillah, it's a season, it's fun, we kind of get accustomed to it. But in reality, I mean, look, think of what we are doing. We are leaving food and drink for a long period of time. Why? Well, it's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There seems to be no immediate benefit beyond the theological and spiritual realm. You look at it physically, monetarily, medically, what are we gaining from fasting? Right? Yeah, sure, there are some diets now, fine. But when you think of it, it's a burden if you look at it from this angle and purely this angle. So when these hypocrites are pretending to be a Muslim, right, pretending to be Muslims, they lose the true benefit of these tasks and are left with the burden, the worldly burden that it causes for them. Likewise, another interesting point that this verse is making is that these hypocrites, Allah is describing them as istawqadu nara. They are taking light and taking heat from a fire, which means that the resource that they are taking from is external, not internal. The believer, on the other hand, their nur is coming from the heart. Yes, it's from the Quran, but their internalization of the Quran, their understanding of the Quran develops and manifests a light within the heart, something that is always with them, and that can't be put out. Natural phenomenon can't put it out. Another human being can't put that light out. It's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who can increase it or decrease it or take it altogether. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. But that light is really our source of happiness in this life and the next life. So when Allah takes away that light, not only are they left with that heat, the heat of the fire that remains, or the charcoal that remains, but also they are put into dhulumat, darkness, and they can't see. So again, think of this in an observable way. Imagine yourself in a dark room, and not just at any time. Imagine you are in your room, right, after the light is being on for a period of time, and all of a sudden you turn off the light and there's no source of light outward, right? There are no external lights from the outside, or it's not a full moon, it's a new moon, there is no light. As soon as you turn off the switch, because our eyes have yet to adjust to that darkness, it is pitch black, we cannot see anything. And since we cannot see anything, we are limited, severely limited, impaired in how we can function, what we can observe, and the information that we can use for our benefit. So this is the state of the hypocrites. Look at how precise the wording is of the Quran. This is why it's so beautiful. They're not in a darkness that they have become adjusted to. They are in an even deeper darkness where they cannot see anything. Not only that, to make it worse, a moment ago, they were able to see everything. So when that light is taken away, it just multiplies the negative effects of it. Let me try and give you another example in this regard. Someone who was rich, for a long period of time, they were wealthy, and they were living a life of wealth. Their life was based off their wealthiness. And then all of a sudden, overnight, they lose everything. It's a lot more difficult for that individual to deal with their situation than someone who has always been poor, right? Or someone who, they were doing fine, but they weren't really wealthy. They had to have a budget. They had to refrain from buying certain things. So when kind of a dip occurs in the economy or in their financial stability, it's not as harmful for that individual, right? But for someone who's all the way up here and then drops all of a sudden, that's just far more profound and far more impairing. So that is the state of the hypocrites specifically. They are in this darkness, but where is the darkness? In the hearts. So their heart is it's darkened. It feels like it's living a life of darkness. It cannot understand what's going on. It cannot understand how to live life, how to live a healthy life. Not only that, the heat of that fire is burning inside them. This is their state. This is a painful state. I mean, this is a very painful state. Anyone who has studied psychology and understands the dynamics of mental health and how that affects the heart, emotions, and how the emotions can really do a number on a person. I mean, this is really difficult to deal with. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in verse 19, أَوْ كَصَيِّبٍ مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ فِيهِ ظُلُمَاتٌ وَرَعْدٌ وَبَرْقٌ يَجْعَلُونَ أَصَابِعَهُم فِي آذَانِهِم مِّنَ الصَّوَاعِقِ حَذَرَ الْمَوْتِ وَاللَّهُ مُحِيطٌ بِالْكَافِرِينَ. Or their example is like the example of heavy rains coming from the sky. And in it is darkness and thunder and lightning. From how intense the storm is, they put their hands they've put their fingers in their ears, trying to protect themselves from the sound of the lightning. I mean, they're literally, what the parable here is saying is that the person is standing directly under an intense, strong, and severe thunderstorm. And what that is bringing the person is rain, right? Heavy rain, which means the clouds are very thick, which brings darkness. So the darkness of that situation, of the rain, of the clouds, and then the thunder and the lightning. Now, when you're sitting at home, for us in SoCal, we don't really see this. But for those of us who have lived in other areas, more humid climate, such as myself in Chicago, you know, seeing us, observing a thunderstorm, a lightning storm from the comfort of your home it's really peaceful. It's beautiful. It brings awe. But have you ever sat outside, unsheltered, under a storm? It's very scary. It is extremely scary, and we become very irritated by the rain as it comes down on us. Now add the thunder and the lightning. That's very intense. It's scary. So these hypocrites, they're either the first example, or this is a second state that they can be in. Right? What is the difference? I'll get to that in just a second. So the elements here are, you have the rain, and then you have the thunder and the lightning. Now remember, this is an analogy. Rain here and the light and the darkness and the thunder and the lightning, they're all representing, they're all a metaphor and analogy for something Islamic, something theological. Light, right? Guidance is always light is always an analogy for guidance, which is coming from the Quran. So the Quran is the nur. So in these parables, when you see nur, it is referring to the Quran. It's an analogy for the Quran because that is the function of the Quran. The opposite, dhulumat, darkness, is referring to the opposite, of the Quran, and that is shirk. Right? Worshipping other than Allah, any theology beyond the theology of Islam, that is darkness. Rain tends to refer to revelation. Why? Because rain is water, and water is the source of biological life. Right? What is the source of inner life, meaning the life of the heart? Revelation. So like rain is the source of the physical life, revelation is the source of spiritual life. So when the Quran talks about, it gives a parable and refers to rain, it is commonly referring to revelation, the Quran itself. So the Quran gives us life. The Ra'd and Barq, thunder and lightning here, is referring to the awamir and nawahi of Allah, the commands of Allah, the obligations and the prohibitions. Why? Because with these commandments, you find that there are ramifications that come with it. You don't do this, well, there's hellfire. You do this, there's punishment. So it becomes, kind of like sitting under thunder and lightning. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very sternly, very powerfully giving us these commandments and saying, you better do this or else there are severe consequences. So it's like like someone sitting under thunder and lightning, and it's scary, right? The person is afraid of being struck by that. Likewise, when we listen to the wa'd and wa'id, the promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his threats, it's like that thunder and lightning, right? And since nothing can shelter us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is like the person sitting under a thunderstorm. So these people, these hypocrites, because of the intensity of what they are seeing in Islam, what they are hearing from the Quran, It is like the person trying to shelter themselves under the storm by putting their fingers in their ears. Is that going to help them anything? Absolutely not. So when the hypocrites are listening to the words of the Quran, see, the problem, that what makes them very different than a disbeliever, right, is that they know the Quran is the truth. So when they are hearing these verses, "O hypocrite, if you continue to do this, there's hellfire." Right? إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ فِي الدَّرْكِ الْأَسْفَلِ مِنَ النَّارِ. The hypocrites are in the lowest levels of hellfire. When they hear this, it strikes them very, very powerfully. So they're trying to shelter themselves in these very senseless ways. Now, Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayh, or continuing, I'm sorry, verse 20, يَكَادُ الْبَرْقُ يَخْطَفُ أَبْصَارَهُم. From the intensity of the lightning, when it strikes, it almost takes away their vision. Right? So anyone who's looked into lightning and it's a little bit closer, it has that effect. Because of the very quick, bright light that hits the person, it affects their vision a little bit. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that, it's so, His commands have such a powerful impact on their hearts. It's almost as if it's affecting their physical faculties. It's almost affecting their physical, their senses itself, subhanAllah. You see, when something inside is affecting us a lot, like stress, it harms, it can affect our senses. So stress, which is something that's not tangible, if it's powerful enough, it could start affecting the tangible within us. So someone who's very stressed out can develop a headache, and that headache can impair or affect their vision, for example. Now, كلما أضاء لهم مشوا فيه وإذا أظلم عليهم قاموا. Every time the lightning strikes and it provides a little bit of light, they move, they function, right? They try and take advantage of that, and when it becomes dark, they stand still. Right? وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَذَهَبَ بِسَمْعِهِمْ وَأَبْصَارِهِمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. If Allah willed it, He would have taken away all of their senses, their hearing and their vision as well. What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying here? See, the nature of hypocrites is that they are so selfish, they just want to benefit from themselves. They're in it for themselves. Their loyalty is to themselves, and they worship themselves, and that's why they put Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aside. So when Islam is offering them something, they start moving around. They start benefiting. Oh, I'm with you, I'm like you, look at me. Let me benefit as well. But as soon as it gets dark, they stop. Right? When things are bad for the believers, they stop. Oh, I'm not a believer, I'm really with you. And subhanAllah, you see this in people today, and they're always around. So let's kind of take all of these variables and paint the deeper picture. What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaching us here? So we looked at the variables individually. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now saying, the analogy is as follows. The Quran comes, okay? The Quran comes and it speaks, and it speaks reality, and it speaks powerfully. And we as individuals begin to judge ourselves. Where do I fit in this? Where's the Quran? How does Quran really view me? Am I on the side of the people of paradise or the people of hellfire? Is the Quran benefiting me for what I want to benefit from? Or is it something beyond that? Is the Quran challenging my loyalty to where it's telling me to put my loyalty and to have loyalty in Allah entirely? Or is it about myself? Now, these are deep questions that anyone who engages Islam at a deeper level will begin to realize. Islam tests our loyalty. Are you loyal to Allah, or are you loyal to yourself? Are you loyal to Allah, or are you loyal to money, or to someone that you love, or to your children? Where's your loyalty? And Ramadan is one of those indicators. Those of us who fast, even though no one is around us, no one can see us, we can eat, drink without anyone knowing, yet we don't do that. I mean, that is a test of loyalty. That is an expression, oh Allah, we are loyal to you. My loyalty transcends my own interests. I am more concerned of my loyalty to you than I am of my own well-being, and therefore I put aside these things. So the Quran comes and starts challenging these things, and sometimes it's, the grass is green in the side of Muslim society. and there's something to benefit, alhamdulillah. But sometimes, it's not that case. So are we still going to be Muslims? As a minority in America, in a society that promotes and perpetuates individuality, hedonistic lifestyles, a freedom of doing whatever you want, are we going to follow that? Are we going to chase the opposite gender so that we can satisfy and gratify ourselves? Or are we going to choose a path that is looked down upon in society? Are we going to choose a path that forces us to be different than the average person in society? I mean, this is a test. For the hypocrites, well, you know what? I'm going to go on the side of my desires because, it's the cool thing to do. Whereas the believer, if they're loyal, if that loyalty is there, that love of Allah is there, then they choose the path of Allah despite being a difficult, rocky road. So these are the variables at play. Now, the hypocrites, they miss something here. And this is one of the reasons why they fall into this hypocrisy. Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi says, look how beautiful this analogy is. A thunderstorm comes. And yes, thunderstorms can cause damage. And yes, thunderstorms create this situation that is scary and that is tense. However, some people, they can only see the storm. This is what they see. They haven't developed the insight to see beyond it. The believer, on the other hand, because of their trust in Allah, because of their pure and solid understanding of who Allah is, the light of the Quran allows them to recognize what's beyond the storm. So although the storm comes and it veils the sun, right? That doesn't mean the sun is no longer there, right? So the hypocrite only sees the storm. The believer, on the other hand, realizes that the sun is right outside of or above the storm. And the believer also realizes that the storm is temporary and that this heavy rain is going to irrigate the land. And when the storm passes, the sun will come out, drying the land and allowing the vegetation to grow. So it is through this turbulence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides life to earth. The believer sees this, whereas the disbeliever doesn't, or I'm sorry, the hypocrite does not. They cannot see beyond the storm. That's it. This is what it is, and that's what it means. That's it. And what you find in a lot of believers is that when a hardship comes about, because they haven't developed these tools, they haven't enhanced their insight on what Islam is telling us and what the Quran is teaching us. When that hardship comes, it's difficult for them to see beyond it. So it is important to recognize one of the major spiritual faults and voids in the hearts of these hypocrites is that they cannot see beyond the current circumstance. Why? Because of their tainted understanding of who Allah is. Why are these hypocrites so reprimanded in the Quran? Why do they have this contradictory nature? Wallahu ta'ala alam, it is because their understanding of who Allah is so tainted, so incomplete, that it developed this strange personality. Hypocrites are so they are so disrespectful to Allah, and their understanding of who He is so incomplete to the extent that they think that they can escape Allah, that they can fool and trick Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this belief lasts with them, it continues with them even until the day of judgment. Allah subhanahu in Surah Al-Hadid, subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Hadid, that He describes the scene where the hypocrites will try and fool Allah by trying to mix with the believers to pass over the bridge into paradise. I mean, can you imagine that? As Muslims, even someone who is not that deep in Islamic knowledge, or someone who is not that practicing, what Islam has provided the average Muslim is a pure understanding of who Allah is, a perfected understanding of who Allah is. For the average Muslim, it is unconceivable. It's imperceivable. I mean, we cannot even entertain the notion that Allah doesn't know something that's going on, that we can somehow hide something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But these hypocrites, they think that they can do that. So what that does is it puts them in this situation of darkness, where they are immobilized. Why is their heart in such a state of turbulence, in such a state of darkness and fear and concern and vulnerability? It's because their theology of who Allah is did that to them. So we as Muslims, if there's one lesson to learn from this, it is that we need to properly understand who Allah is. We need to have strong theology of who Allah is, and that starts with Tawheed. That starts with understanding monotheism. What is Tawheed? What does it mean? What does it indicate? And inshallah, in the upcoming parables, we will try and elaborate on that. But remember, as believers, that we need to understand that what this is representing here, the analogy here, is something that's going on in the heart. The heart of a hypocrite is burning. It's feeling the fear like the thunder. It is feeling the anxiety like the darkness, because of the darkness. It is feeling the pain because of the lightning. It's feeling that, and all of it goes back to their belief of who Allah is. And that belief is adulterated, it's tainted, it's imperfect. Right? So the opposite of that is developing the understanding of who Allah is, so that when the storm comes, we remember that the sun is above that storm, the sun is still shining, and that storm is going to revive the earth. It's going to make it more beautiful, and the storm is always temporary. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow these verses to be a beauty in our hearts. اللهم اجعل القرآن العظيم ربيع قلوبنا ونور صدورنا وجلاء همومنا وجلاء حزننا وذهاب همومنا. May this Quran be a source of gardens for our hearts, and let it be something that takes away our worry and our anxiety. وجزاكم الله خير. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين.